I'll just start off the presentation. Can you see that, Aaron?
Yes, I can see it and I can hear you.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the rule changes for 2025, and as Aaron has said, I'll focus on the FootO changes, those that apply to FootO. So at the moment, the proposed new rules are currently being considered by the ESB, the IOF Event Supervisory Board, which is a subgroup of IOF Council. And they will be published in December to be valid from 1st of January. They've had the ESB have had them for some time, and I'm actually pretty confident that they will be approved, and therefore what I'm going to talk about and tell you will in fact be correct. But it's just a slight health warning that there's just a chance that something may change, but I don't think that to be a problem. So I'll concentrate on those changes relevant to world ranking events. Most of the other changes are very minor or are for specific high-level events such as World Champs, World Cup, Junior World Champs, or World Masters. In fact, some of them are, quite a lot of them are to do with rare cases where you have ties in a qualification race for example, the rather complicated process of moving from the middle distance race in the World Masters to the long distance final. And now that we're trying to have computer programs run all these processes, we've realized that there are some small cases that we just need to tidy up in the rules. And just remember that when the rules are published, there's a list of the latest changes at the end, and amended rules have a vertical line in the left margin. So one thing we've been doing is tidying up the language. This is not a very significant change, really, but we realized that we were using the words runner, athlete, and competitor rather randomly through the rules with no particular logic. So we've mostly replaced runner and athlete by competitor throughout. One reason we chose competitor is for consistency with the other disciplines, trailo, skio, and mountain bike. We can use the same word there. But there's no change in the meaning in this change. So in the rules, there's a list of other rules type documents which you need to take account of. It's this rule, 210. And one thing we've just done is added in the IOF transgender policy, which was only came into effect last year. And also we're mentioning the World Ranking Scheme rules, which hadn't been included. One perhaps more significant change is the Leibniz Convention, which has now been retired. This was the declaration from the IOF General Assembly in Leibniz, Austria in 2000, which talked about it being of decisive importance to raise the profile of the sport, to further the spread of orienteering to more people and new areas, and to get orienteering into the Olympic Games. So this was a couple of page document, and probably if you've been on an event advisors course, we talked quite a lot about it. But it's now 24 years old, and although many of the statements still apply, getting orienteering into the Olympic Games is more of a long-term ambition than an immediate goal. And there are now more options for making orienteering exciting for spectators and the media than could have been envisaged back in 2000. So we've removed it from Appendix 5 and other places where it was referenced in the rules. In fact, we've left Appendix 5 there blank so as not to renumber all the other appendices, and we may well put something else in Appendix 5 next year. David Roach talked just now about World Ranking Event applications. We've just clarified the rules exactly as David said, that applications for the early months must reach the IOF at least 6 months prior to the event date. Otherwise, they're due no later than the 30th of September in the year prior to the event year. Late applications are not encouraged, but are sometimes approved. In fact, I have to say that I'm the event advisor for a World Ranking event next Sunday, and I only got asked to be event advisor in September, and that's when the application went in, but the application did go through. So, World Ranking event class names. Previously, there was a rule that said the class names must be W21 and M21. But if the World Ranking event is part of a larger event, there are other less competitive classes for those age groups, then that's a problem, because you'll then be calling the World Ranking event classes W21E and M21E, and then maybe the next lowest class will be M21L and W21L. So this new, we've changed the wording of 5.4 to say the competitions are called W21E and M21E. And that applies even if you have just got a very simple World Ranking event just with those two classes. And following on from that, should a class have too many entries, it may be split. And so the competition classes are then called W21E1, W21E2, etc. We're just wanting to standardize the names. Now, you may have heard that we're now letting some athletes enter as IOF independent athletes. This is purely for World Ranking events. Competitors who are citizens of a country which doesn't have an IOF member, or where the IOF member is suspended, may apply to compete as an IOF independent athlete, or IIA for short. And there are some requirements for IIA status, which are published on the website in the rules section, and you have to pay an annual administration fee. So this new rule was actually added in July 2024, and you may have already seen it. An annual fee is payable. But it's really important as the event advisor to be aware of this, and the organizer needs to know if someone enters your event and says they're an independent athlete, is that really true, and are they allowed to compete? There are actually 3 separate cases. One is athletes with no IOF federation, so perhaps an athlete from Iceland, which isn't an IOF federation at the moment, wants to enter. Secondly, athletes whose IOF federation is currently suspended for non-payment of fees. And thirdly, perhaps the obvious one, athletes whose IOF federation is currently suspended for other reasons. And we're thinking of Russia and Belarus at the moment. And in the document on their IOF website, it says what the exact requirements are. And I think for the third case, the athletes have to be living resident in a country outside of Russia or Belarus. So the full details are on the IOF rules page. How do you see who those athletes currently are? Well, you can go into Eventor. Anybody can do this, and just go to the athletes page, and in nationality, put in independent. That's one of the options, and you can see there are about 10 or so athletes currently registered. Just a small point about the knockout sprint. More and more we're seeing that federations are organising knockout sprints as world ranking events and not just in the very highest level of events. We found that occasionally we have to have extra runners, that is more than 6 in one of the knockout races. What we previously said was that where you had more than 6, you had to reduce it to 6 by taking the person who was ranked highest in the world rankings. But we've now found that actually it's better to let both tied runners go into the next round, and therefore it's not too bad to have sometimes 7 in a knockout race. So the rule now says, in the event of a tie for any qualification place in any round, the tied competitors will all be promoted to the next round. We've got a rule about the use of the map on the competition day, because we need to prevent competitors who have finished showing the course to competitors who have yet to start. Now, of course, if you have a quarantine where all the competitors who've yet to start have to go, then this really isn't a problem. But at a world ranking event, typically you don't have a quarantine. And so to a certain extent, we have to trust the competitors, but we also need to have a rule. The previous rule said on the day of the competition, talking about whether you could use the map, but actually we can't control what happens before competitors arrive at the venue. They might want to look at the map when they get out of bed in the morning, or when they are in the bus on the way to the venue. So we can actually only control what happens at the venue. So Rule 15.6, we've changed the wording to say if there's no quarantine, then the use of any map is prohibited at the competition venue until permitted by the organizer.
David, can you hold on a second? We have a couple of comments here.
Good.
David Rhodes commented that please make sure that the IOF independent athletes do need to get an IOF ID to run at a WRE. So from the previous presentation, we found that they need to have an IOF ID also. So that applies to the independent athlete also. And then Ted Finch asked a question that since there are more than 6 in the knockout sprint round, is there also in protest appealed? I don't really get this question. So if Ted is online, you can maybe phrase it a little bit further, please.
You want to come in, Ted?
He just to put another note there. Yeah, okay.
There could be a situation, I think, if there was a successful protest or appeal that someone could get taken forward into the next round and therefore also give you greater than 6, rather than just being a tied situation?
Yes, that's right. Well, and in fact, that's often that was the case in the in the World Championships, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But then I think that's obvious that then you're going to end up in 7. But what we're clarifying here is that in the event of a tie, or the change we're making is that in the event of a tie, then also you might well end up with 7, and that's okay.
Yeah. But yeah, you wouldn't get the situation of someone going through on a protest and then by knocking somebody else out.
No, we didn't have that before, and no, that's not changing.
No. Good. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we're making some changes about map scales for world ranking events. For long distance, we've actually got a completely new rule, so it's all a bit clearer now. Rule 15.10, which just applies to world ranking events. For long distance races, the map scale must be 1 to 15,000, or if approved by the IOF event advisor, 1 to 10,000. Now that hasn't changed, actually, that's just the same as before. But the change is coming for middle distance races, that the map scale must be 1 to 10,000, or if approved by the IOF event advisor, 1 to 7,500. And I understand that the FootO Commission have received quite a lot of rule deviation requests for use of 1 to 7,500 at middle distance races. So this means that from the 1st of January, a rule deviation would not be required. Rather similarly, for sprint, we're saying that going forward, 1 to 3,000 could be used as well. Now, Aaron mentioned yesterday about competitors who failed to record a punch. There was a very well-placed Italian at the World Cup in Italy, or who would have been well-placed if they hadn't failed to punch the last control. And then there was, I think, a Danish athlete in the World Championship sprint in Edinburgh. And it's not very good from the point of view of the media and spectators if you see someone run rather close to the last control, but they're then disqualified. They've obviously been there. So we're still saying that 20.3 competitors are responsible for punching their control card at each control using the punching unit provided. So there's no change at all to that. But as Aaron, I think, mentioned, we realized that we can extend the punching range at the last control just to help athletes achieve a punch at that last control. And we've actually putting that as a rule to allow that. So when contactless punching is used, the last control may have a punching unit with a longer range than standard. And this must be stated in the final bulletin. You might ask, well, why aren't we just allowing a longer punching range for all controls? Well, for most controls, we don't seem to have the same problem, but also we do need athletes to go to the controls, and we don't want athletes being a metre or two away from a control in general and still achieving a punch. We want them to go very close. It's a bit different at the last control, because from the last control, you're then constrained to run down the run-in. So probably you're then channeled from the last control down the run-in. You had to run very near it in any case. So you can achieve a longer range if you're using Sported Ent using a BS11 station instead of a BSF8 or BSF9. And those BS11s are typically used for mountain biking. So this isn't a requirement, probably won't be needed in world ranking events, but it may well be useful in high-level televised events.
Question, doesn't that risk that the athletes get even more sloppier in their punching?
Oh, not really, because as I said, 20.3 still applies. Definitely no change to that. So if they want to risk being sloppy, then they're risking not getting a punch, and they will be disqualified. Now, the use of GPS watches has evolved over time. We originally banned them altogether, and then we allowed them for world ranking events. After quite a lot of feedback from athletes and the athletes' commissions, we've now decided that going forward, the same rule now applies for all level events, including World Championships. So athletes are very keen to be able to record their track. They don't all get issued with GPS devices to carry on their backs. So we're now saying that at all events, athletes can carry their and wear their GPS watches, but they must not be used for communication or navigation. And there will be a certain amount of trust involved here. The athletes feel strongly that they can be trusted, and we'll just have to see how this goes over the coming years.
Related to maybe the jury matters also, we have a question about it. Just out of curiosity, could it happen and could it be allowed to have 8 runners in a knockout sprint, for example, if it happens that we have a few tied athletes and also the same protest appeal upheld?
Well, I'd say yes, it could happen, but I think as maybe we saw in Edinburgh, in that case, it's best to try and spread the extra athletes as evenly as possible. So suppose you've got 2 athletes who should have been promoted, and according to the promotion rules, they should both go into the same race in the next round. You should actually spread them out so that rather than one race having 8 and the others having 6s, one has 8, one and another, sorry, 2 have 7. Okay.
Then another one related to the punching, the last control. The comment is here that the BS11 station doesn't have a hole in it. If athlete is running with that sport ident, he or she doesn't have opportunity to punch the control.
Well, that's right. But what you can actually, and that's a very good point, you should give the opportunity to punch, even if your SIAC has died. So what you should do, if you do put a longer range unit, also have the shorter range unit with the hole there, so that such an athlete could use it. Okay, moving on to some small matters relating to juries. up to now, we've said that in competitions with mass or chasing starts, a jury member must be present at the finish line. Well, we're taking that out of the rule. For a start, that seemed to indicate that the jury member should be a finished judge, which actually they shouldn't be. But in any case, certainly at the higher level events now, we have photo finish equipment, and any close finishes can be re-examined on the photograph. So we're just taking that out. High level events, not world rank events, you have to pay a protest fee of €50 when making a protest. I think I may have mentioned this in a previous year, but that protest fee can either be paid in cash or maybe with a credit card to the organizer, or you can go to the IOF webpage, and on the office webpage, there's a way of making a payment to the IOF. And so that's a perfectly good way of paying your protest fee. If the protest is accepted and the fee needs to be returned, you just need to tell the IOF office to return it. And so we're just taking out that line. You don't have to pay it to the IOF senior event advisor. You just have to pay it. And in 29.8, we've added on a few words to say that decisions of the jury are final, subject only to an appeal made according to Rule 30.1. In fact, this appeals have been in place as a possibility for many years now, and we're just clarifying that decisions of the jury are normally final, but there is occasionally the opportunity to make an appeal. And lastly, about juries, at World Championships, we've had 5 jury members, but now we're changing that to just 3. And one reason for that is that it's quite difficult to find jury members, especially because they're not paid, and we think that a 3-member jury can often operate more effectively than a large 5-member jury. Some small clarification with regard to sanctions. The event organizer, referee, or as a result of a protest, the jury has responsibility for imposing sanctions. We're now saying relating to an event, not during an event. And note the rule 29.12, if there's a protest, if the jury is not yet set up, or if the event is over and the jury is no longer active, then the IOF disciplinary panel acts as the jury. So we'll just look at an example of that. Suppose 2 months before an event, a competitor is found to have breached the embargo. Now, actually, it's always been the case, I think, that the organizer would deal with this. So the organizer, in consultation with the IOF event advisor, considers the matter and might decide to disqualify the competitor or not let them enter. So the competitor could then complain to the organizer if they feel that's not fair. And then if the organizer rejects the complaint, the competitor could then put in a protest, which would have to be considered by the IOF disciplinary panel. So finally, I hope it's been helpful to get a preview of the proposed rule changes. And I think we're not running too far behind schedule, but I'll let Aaron say when the next part will start. Are there any more comments or questions, Jaska?
There is one comment from Ted Finch that the photo finish application for iPhone is available, and if you go to the chat box in the Teams here, so you can find the link to the application there. But I don't see any other comments right now or questions.
Jaska, probably it's a good time to ask Lochin's question now from the previous session.
Yeah, I was thinking about the having that from the clinic question, because that's related to the training or education of EAs and SEAs, I would say. But anyways, we can ask the question. Did you hear in David Roach's presentation the question about how we will deal with the kind of process of EAs and SEAs being up to date?
Yes, I saw that. I think it's more about what control is there over EAs and SEAs. And I'd say one answer is that we do train them, and in their initial IOF event advisor clinic, and then we update them regularly with seminars such as this. But I have to say that to a large extent, we do have to rely on event advisors acting sensibly and independently, and we don't monitor every aspect of their work. Would you agree with that, Aaron?
And Helge, can you comment that on behalf of the FootO also?
Yes, I think David is fine. I'm not having anything to say in addition to this.
What about you, Aaron?
Yeah, I'm fine with that also.
Okay, good. So I think it's no more questions or comments anymore for this.
Okay, then I would like to